introduction to the organization that is putting this event on tonight. Now, there's a number of different organizations represented, and we're excited to be working together on a number of different fronts. But I have recently taken the position as CEO of an organization that's been here in the state for a number of years, but is focused on some very important state-based policy work. And it's called the New Hampshire Center for Economic Policy. And as a think tank, we have partnered with a national organization, the SPN, or the State Policy Network, which is a large national organization which funds and works with and helps direct state-based think tanks. And I'm sure that many of you will agree that in New Hampshire we need strong conservative voices articulating conservative policy. You'd all agree with that, right? The New Hampshire Center for Economic Policy will be a think tank focused on state-based issues, stopping things like Common Core. We will be fighting against Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire. We will also be putting forward new business tax proposals like the business flat tax, which will lower business taxes on the small business owner by over 40% in the state of New Hampshire. I want to encourage you to go to our website. It's nheconomics.org. Okay, nheconomics.org. Very straight, very simple. Go to our website, check us out. We'd love to see you at some of our upcoming events. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you a world-renowned neurosurgeon, pediatric neurosurgeon, a man who burst onto the national scene at the National Prayer Breakfast. I can tell you personally, my wife DVR'd the speech. When I got home, she said, "You have to watch this. You have to watch this." My wife's not a very political person, you know. This is abnormal. So I sat down and I watched the speech, and like many of you, after we picked our jaws back up, right, I said, "Yes, that's what I've been screaming at this television. Somebody heard me." I'm sure that many of you here in this room have read the book America the Beautiful and other works by Dr. Carson. And it is my great pleasure, a man who truly in this crowd needs no introduction, but it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Ben Carson. All right.
Delighted to be with you this evening. We've had an opportunity to travel around New Hampshire a little bit today and meet lots of people. One of the things that really impresses me about the people in New Hampshire is they seem to know a lot. And that's a good thing, because that really distinguishes them from a lot of other people. I was not someone who knew a lot as a kid growing up. I knew silly stuff like latest fashions, and I could name every car going down the streets of Detroit, make, model, year, and price. But that information at 50 cents might get you a can of soda. It won't get you a lot more. And, unfortunately, a lot of people today are like that in our society. You've probably seen some of those jaywalking segments with Jay Leno, where the man on the street interviews, or Jesse Waters' world. I mean, people absolutely don't know anything. And these people vote. It seems like there's a lot of people that go into the voting booth and they're looking for a D or an R, or a name that looks familiar. I mean, the name could be Satan, and they say, oh yeah, yeah. And in many cases it is, you know. And that is something that has landed us in the situation that we're in now. And, you know, I always paid attention to politics. This is going to be problematic. This is channel 13 one. That's not going to work.
Oops, microphone went fuzzy, and here is the house man of all trades, looking to see if he can find a bad connection here. Of course, it worked for everybody else who tested it. Just put it down and speak loud.
Now, what I can try to do, if everybody's very quiet, because I am relatively soft-spoken, so, oh, there's hope. Let's see. All right, I'm going to try to project.
Now we're going to get the real close-up view here.
I'm a very soft-spoken person, so if my voice drops down, too bad. I'll try to do my best. But you know, when I decided that that I was going to retire, I really thought that it was going to be a more traditional type of retirement. You know, we bought a house on a golf course in Florida. I always wanted to play the organ. You know, when I was in the operating room, I'd be playing Bach organ works, you know, and it was going to be great. We bought this beautiful organ, and I was going to learn all these languages, and I bought all these Rosetta Stones. I was going to watch all the movies I never saw. People always say, "What? You mean you never saw The Godfather? Are you kidding me?" And I was going to read all the books that I never had a chance to read. You know, I think the Lord had a different plan for my life. And, you know, going into the political arena was clearly not something that I was particularly interested in doing, to be honest with you. Knowing how brutal it is, how terrible it is, what a hardship it would be on me and on my family. But then I started thinking. I started thinking about all of those people who preceded us. What if they had taken the easy way out? What if they had put their feet up and just relaxed in their hammocks and drank lemonade? Where would we be today? And you have to ask yourself the question, is our country worth saving? And I actually believe that it is. I think we all have to do what we're called on to do. I didn't realize that I would be called on to go into public office, but you know, after the prayer breakfast, a lot of people started clamoring, and I thought that perhaps it was just a temporary thing, and that it would die down and go away. But it never did. In fact, it continued to grow. And I began to ask myself, what is it that people are asking for? I started running into particularly a lot of elderly Americans who told me that they had given up on our nation and that they were waiting to die. And that kind of really hit me. I said, have we really fallen that far? But I believe the answer is yes. And we've done it in a relatively short period of time. You know, the United States, did we get a new microphone?
We did. Let's try it one time. If that doesn't work, then we won't do it.
I'll be at Radio Shack back in 10 seconds.
Okay.
Big hand for Al, the owner, who fixed it in record time.
I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to let it sit right here. Now, what was I talking about?
Elderly, not one.
No country for waiting to die.
Waiting to die. Hey, it sounds like you guys are paying attention.
We had to.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, what is it that really people are saying about what's happened to us? This is a country that was founded by people who wanted a nation that was centered around the people. The people are supposed to be the pinnacle of power in this nation. And what we have turned into is a nation where the government is taking control. The reason that I was such an adamant opponent of Obamacare is not because I didn't think it could work. That was secondary. The real reason I was opposed to it is because the most important thing you have is your health and your health care. And when you turn that over to a government bureaucrat, you are starting the process of giving control of your life over to the bureaucrat. That's the real reason that I thought it was such a horrible thing. And a lot of people didn't really grasp that. They didn't realize what we were doing. It's not too late to change it, but basically what we must reestablish is a situation where the government responds to the will of the people and not the people to the will of the government. That's what our founders are so proud of. You know, America is a land of dreams. And it certainly has been that for me. I dreamed as a youngster of being a doctor. There was nothing that appealed to me more than being a doctor. I didn't want to be a soldier. I didn't want to be a fireman or even a policeman. No fun, no offense. But I wanted to be a doctor. And I even like going to the doctor's office. So it tells you I was a strange kid. And going to the hospital was like the best thing in the world because I could sit in the hallway and listen to the PA system. Dr. Jones to the emergency room. Dr. Johnson, they sounded so important. And I'd be thinking one day they'll be saying, Dr. Carson, but of course we have beepers now. But still, but the dreams persist. And America, despite all of our problems, is still a land of dreams. You still see people trying to come here. You don't see a lot of people trying to escape from here, even though you get all these people talking about how horrible we are and all the awful things that we did, and yet, are they leaving? No, of course not. And that's what we must remember, and that's what we truly are going to have to think about preserving for those who come behind us. You know, my whole life has really been spent looking out for the welfare of children, and have spent many a night, all night long, operating in desperate situations sometimes, trying to turn a situation around. And it is always so wonderful, you know, to see the results. Even now that I've retired, I operated on nearly 15,000 people. So, you know, I run into families. I run into families and patients all the time. A few weeks ago when I was in Kentucky, I ran into a young man that I operated on over 20 years ago when he was an infant. And he had just graduated from college, #1 in his class. The operation he had was called a cerebral hemispherectomy, where you remove half the brain. If he can do that with half a brain, can you imagine? It's a pretty amazing thing. And tomorrow I'm going to Illinois, and I know one of the people who will be introduced from the audience was one of my patients. She's now 29 years old, but when I operated on her, she was 3 or 4, and had what was considered an inoperable brain tumor, and now she's doing perfectly fine. You know, it is such an incredible privilege to be able to intervene in someone's life, and through the grace of God, to be able to give them longevity and quality of life. And really, that's the only reason right now that Candy and I are considering, you know, jumping into the political arena, because we're concerned about the quality of life for the next generation. And I realize that, you know, all the pundits, all the so-called experts say, well, come on, it's ridiculous. You're not a politician. You haven't been involved in political life. You can't possibly do this. Go sit down and enjoy life. And you know, that perhaps would be good advice if these were ordinary times, but they're not ordinary times. Our country is on the precipice right now, going one way or the other way. And if we continue with politics as usual, I'm afraid the way we're going to go is the way that we've been heading for the last couple of decades, and it's not the right place. And what we are going to have to do is recenter the country. And the way to do that is with logic and common sense. Now, the majority of the people in this country actually do have common sense. They actually are logical. They actually believe in traditional American values. The problem is that they've been beaten into submission. You know, Saul Alinsky, who wrote the book Rules for Radicals, and I highly recommend that book because you can see exactly what's happening if you read that book. But he had 13 rules. The #1 rule was you make the majority believe that their beliefs are archaic. That no one intelligent thinks that way. All intelligent people think only the way you think. And what will happen is those people will shut up. And they will be quiet because they will be afraid of being ostracized, be afraid of being attacked, afraid of their livelihood, afraid of government audits, afraid of a whole host of things, and they will just keep silent. And as long as they stay silent, you can do anything you want. You can completely change the direction of the country. The other thing is, beside the intimidation, is the fact that we have so many people who don't arm themselves with an adequate amount of knowledge. Founders of our nation said that our freedom and our system is based upon a well-informed and educated populace. And if we ever become other than that, the nature of the country will change. Why did they say that? Because they knew that if you had people who were not well-informed, that they would be easily manipulated by slick politicians and dishonest media. And that's all it would take. Dishonesty and a media that forgets what its real responsibility is. Our media today has forgotten that. They are the only industry protected by the Constitution of the United States. And why were they protected? Because they were supposed to be on the side of the people. They were supposed to expose corruption wherever it existed. They were not supposed to choose sides. Because when they choose sides, they enable the side that they choose to ignore the law, to ignore the Constitution, and to ride roughshod over the rights of the people. And we can only hope that they will wake up soon and recognize that if the country goes off the cliff, they're going off with it. And I believe that they will recognize that. The question is, will they recognize it in time? But in the meantime, it's really up to us, the people of the United States, to be willing to stand up for what we believe in. We have to stop being silent little sheep who are afraid of everything. That's the problem with our Congress. You know, they're afraid of everything. They have jelly spines, you know. They're afraid that they're going to be blamed for everything. They haven't learned that they're going to be blamed anyway. So, you know, why not get something done? Why not stand up, you know, the way that the way that our system was designed, you know, with divided government and 3 co-equal branches, it was for a reason. It was because the founders realized that there might come a time when we might have one branch, and the one they were particularly afraid of was the executive branch, that would start playing fast and loose with the rules, that would decide that there's nobody's going to do anything to me, and that they can do anything they want as long as they have a pen and a phone. You know, the thing that can stop that is the Congress. Because Congress, and they probably forgot this, they make the laws. And even though the laws that they make must be approved by the executive branch, if the executive branch does not approve them, they can override it. And they need to begin to start working together. Forget about being Democrats and Republicans. And they need to start thinking about being Americans and recognize you know, if we can get people to start thinking that way, this executive action stuff will end almost immediately. Because believe it or not, there are good Democrats. And I don't know where they are, but they're because honestly, I didn't hear a single one of them come out and condemn what Harry Reid did when he told his big awful lies about. Not a single one, but there's got to be some integrity in them, and you know, we need to begin to appeal to the integrity in everybody. But more important than that, you know, I think we perhaps have one final chance at redemption, and that's going to be in 2016. But it can't just be a presidential election. We want to have another wave election, so that we bring in enough people who are logical. I don't care what party they belong to, but they have to be logical and they have to love this nation. And if we bring in enough of those kind of people so that we start doing things that are pro-America, then I don't think it would take us very long to turn the situation around, to turn the economy around. You know, we clearly have to get our military back up to speed. I mean, there's some real urgency in terms of our readiness to respond to issues around the world. You know, I don't even know if we can respond to one issue. You know, during World War II, think about it. I mean, we sent young men from the cities, the suburbs, the country, to fight a war on 2 different fronts of the world. Our young women went into the factories and built more airplanes and tanks and mortars than anybody could imagine. We overwhelmed them with our industrial might and with our determination. I don't know that we have that capacity now. Our Navy is at its smallest level since 1917. And the heart of our personnel is being eaten out by sequesters. Our majors and our captains are being told that their commissions are not being renewed, and they have to leave. And these are the people who would become the generals, who would become the leaders, who we've invested enormous amount of resources in. And I know a lot of military people. Candy and I have always had a lot of military friends. These guys are smart. I mean, these are not dumb people by any stretch of the imagination. And for us to be, basically gutting our system is extraordinarily problematic. Our equipment is deteriorating as well. But that's only one small part of the problem. We need to have major military research. That's how we got stealth bombers and things of this nature. That's what gives us our edge. And not only are we not developing things the way we should, we're letting what we do have deteriorate. Guess what? That means somebody else is going to catch up. At the same time, you have all of these radical Islamic elements that are expanding. And they're able to recruit like mad because, they look like the victors. They look like the people who are winning. And everybody wants to be on the side that's winning. And they look at us and they say, there's nothing there. This is America. We're the people with the can-do attitude. And this is what's happening to us before our very eyes. We're seeing our country deteriorate. We're seeing the perfect storm development. Those who want to destroy us growing, getting stronger, and us getting weaker. And if you look back through the annals of history, you'll recognize that as a pattern that precedes the downfall of a great nation. And we feel helpless, but we're not helpless. Because each one of us has a sphere of influence. There's no one in this room who doesn't have a sphere of influence. We need to talk to the people in our spheres of influence. Just like in the pre-revolutionary days, those settlers, those patriots, they were disgusted by the tyrannical efforts of King George III. And they started having town hall meetings and meeting in their barns and their living rooms. And they invited everybody, even the loyalists. They said, come on in, let's talk about America. Let's talk about the kind of country that we want to have, that we are willing to fight for, that we want to pass on to our children and to our grandchildren. And they encouraged each other. And that's how a ragtag bunch of militiamen defeated the most powerful empire and the most professional army on earth. Now, but it wasn't only because of that. What I'm going to tell you right now is very important. It was also because they had a connection with God Almighty. That was really during the Battle of Monongahela, during the French and Indian War, George Washington was a courier for General Braddock. Back and forth with all the other couriers across the war zone, all the couriers were shot dead, except for George Washington. He had 2 horses shot from beneath him. His overcoat had 4 bullet holes in it, but he had no flesh wounds. Years later, he returned to that area, and one of the Indian chiefs who had been involved in that war heard that he was going to be in the area. The Indian chief was quite elderly by now, and he knew he didn't have long. And he asked his people to take him to meet George Washington, who had not quite yet become president. And when he met George Washington, he said, "Sir, I am an expert marksman, and I've shot you many times. And my men shot you many times. And pretty soon I told them to stop wasting their ammunition. And I, before I died, wanted to meet a man who was protected by the great spirit above, who was destined to become the father of a great nation." That story used to be in all the American history books up until about 1935, when it became politically incorrect to put something like that in there. And there are multiple other stories like that. It's just amazing the things that happen. And that's one of the reasons that we say that we are one nation under God. It's one of the reasons that we put on our coinage and on our bills, in God we trust. It's one of the reasons that our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, talks about certain unalienable rights given to us by our Creator. And we need not be ashamed of who we are. I know that President Obama says we're not a Judeo-Christian nation. But he doesn't get to decide that. We get to decide who we are. We must allow ourselves not to be intimidated, not to be frightened, because people will call us names, because they will interfere with your job or the job of someone in your family. When we consider what those who preceded us had on the line, what they were willing to give up. They were willing to give up their fortunes. They were willing to give up their lives. Nathan Hale, teenage spy for us, caught by the British, ready to be executed. What did he say? My only regret is that I have but one life to give for my nation. That's the kind of courage that created the foundation of the nation that we live in. On D-Day, during World War II, our soldiers storming the beaches of Normandy, the Axis powers entrenched behind their bunkers, firing machine guns, mowing our people down 100 at a time. 1,000 bodies laying dead on the beaches of Normandy. Did our troops turn back? Were they frightened? Yes, they were frightened, but they did not turn back. They stepped over the bodies of their dead comrades, and they stormed that beach, and they overwhelmed the Axis powers, knowing in many cases that they would never see their loved ones again, that they would never see their beloved homeland again. Why were they willing to do that? It wasn't for themselves. It's for us. So that we could live in a free country. And now that baton is in our hands. And the question is, what are we willing to do? Are we going to duck and hide and hope no one notices us so that we can lead our comfortable lives? Or are we going to stand together? And are we going to recognize that this is one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all? Thank you very much.
GrokTV.